Ever since moving to Mexico, I've been in this weird online debate that I didn't even know existed before I moved here, because apparently a lot of Mexicans get angry when the Americans call the United States America. But the Americans get confused because to us, that's literally what we've called ourselves our entire lives. So who is actually right? And why does this argument get so emotional? Well, the deeper that I looked into this, the more I realized that this is not really a geography debate. It's a language debate. It's a culture debate. It's an education debate. And in a strange way, both sides kind of make sense. And by the way, guys, if you guys enjoy conversations about culture differences between the US and Mexico, make sure you subscribe. I am still learning a lot of this stuff myself while I'm living here. And I think that it's interesting figuring it all out together in real time. And at first, a lot of Americans hear this argument and it sounds ridiculous to them because from the American perspective, we are literally called Americans. That's what the world calls us. But here, there's a lot of different things that people don't realize. In the United States, we are educated completely differently. Americans are taught North America, South America as two separate continents, not one giant continent called America. So in the American brain, North America is the continent, South America is the continent, but America, that means the United States. And because of that, most Americans do not mentally associate the word America with Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, or Canada. That's not how we were raised. So when Americans say, I'm American, we are not saying we own the continent. That's genuinely not the mindset. Therefore, when Latin Americans accuse Americans of being arrogant for saying America, Americans get confused because to Americans, they're just using a normal word that they've heard since birth. And this goes way deeper than slang. The United States is literally named the United States of America. That's the official name. The word America is legally part of the country's identity. And historically, people from the United States have been called Americans for hundreds of years. In wars, in treaties, in newspapers, in politics, in global media. This isn't some modern internet invention. It's deeply embedded into the history of America. But then I started realizing why Latin Americans get frustrated. Because in many Spanish-speaking countries, they are taught a completely different continent model. In many places, America is considered one continent. North America, South America, separately. One America. So from their perspective, everybody from the continent is American. Mexicans are American. Brazilians are American. Canadians are American. Everybody. And therefore, when only the United States claims the word American, it can sound exclusionary. Like one country took the entire identity of the continent. And when you understand their education system, that reaction makes sense as well. Because this is where things get really interesting because Americans don't just hear the word America in school. We hear it everywhere. Captain America, American Dream, American Pie, American Idol, Made in America, Bank of America, God Bless America. Hulk Hogan saying, I am a real American. America this, America that, America everything. So by adulthood, the word feels completely normal, not offensive, not political, not disrespectful, just normal. Therefore, when Americans move to Latin America and suddenly they get attacked online for saying America, it's very shocking to them because nowhere else in the world do most Americans experience this. In Europe, they call us Americans. In Asia, they call us Americans. In Canada, they call us Americans. In Australia, you guessed it, they call us Americans. In English globally, America almost universally means somebody from the United States. So Americans don't feel like they're using some offensive term. They feel like they are using a genuinely globally accepted English word. And actually, I'm really curious how people from different countries see this. So wherever you're from, drop a comment and tell me how you learned it growing up. Because I think this whole thing depends heavily on where you are and how people are educated. But then Latin Americans usually respond with this argument. They say, That's only because the United States became culturally dominant. And that's probably true too, to be honest. Hollywood, music, politics, military power, global influence. The United States became so globally dominant that the word America slowly became associated primarily with the USA. And from the Latin American perspective, that feels unfair because they also live in America. And there's another part of this debate that Americans genuinely struggle to understand. If Americans are not supposed to use the word American, then who is supposed to use it? Because Mexicans usually call themselves Mexican. Brazilians usually call themselves Brazilian. Argentinians call themselves Argentinian. Nobody really introduces themselves internationally as I'm American, meaning the continent. So to Americans, it can feel like people want the word to disappear completely, not share it. And that creates even more confusion. Therefore, the two sides end up talking past each other. Latin Americans think Americans are claiming ownership of the continent. But Americans think we're literally just using our own country's name and identity. And both sides walk away feeling offended. And the language makes this even harder because in Spanish, there's another common word, estadounidense, meaning person from the United States or United Statesian. So from the Latin American perspective, there is another option. But in English, there really isn't. Because nobody in English says United Statesian. That sounds ridiculous in English. So Americans feel like they're being told to stop using a word without having a realistic replacement in their own language. And after living in Mexico, I think the biggest problem is this. Both sides assume the other side is acting intentionally, but I really don't think that most people are. I think that most Americans growing up hearing the word America is just very common, and they never stop to think about how it sounds to other people in other countries. And at the same time, I also think that Latin Americans don't really realize that Americans were taught something completely different in school. So both sides end up feeling disrespected, even when that usually isn't the intention. And moving to Mexico is what made me finally understand this conversation even exists. Before that, I had never even thought of the word America this deeply in my life. And to me, it was just normal English. But now I can also understand why some people see it differently. And I think that is very important. You don't have to agree with somebody to at least understand where they're coming from. And I don't think that this debate is going away anytime soon, to be honest, because language evolves differently in different cultures. And sometimes two groups of people can use the same exact word, but grow up with completely different meanings attached to it. So now I genuinely love to hear the perspective of someone else respectfully. If you're from the United States, did you even know that this debate existed before hearing about this online? And if you're from Mexico or Latin America, do you think that Americans are misunderstanding the issue? Or do you think that the word America has simply evolved differently in English? And if you enjoy these type of conversations where we try to understand the differences between American and Mexican culture together, well then make sure you subscribe. I'm definitely not an expert at any of this. I'm just a guy from the US living in Mexico trying to understand all of it the same as everybody else.